and it's about as big as it was in 2018. The projections from our team are for it to grow at 5% this year in 21. In 2018, in the second quarter, the economy was this big. It was projected to grow at like 1.5% to 2%, and the interest rate environment was 100 to 150 basis points higher, and there wasn't all this. So there wasn't interest rate accommodation, and there wasn't fiscal stimulus out there. Now you have the same thing. So the fiscal stimulus is needed to help people make it across the river here. You have 6% plus unemployment. You have these companies that haven't opened. That's the PPP program. You have holes in state budgets and that were created by the cost of paying for all this work, and maybe tax loss revenues and stuff. Those ought to be dealt with. And I think if we deal with that responsibly, then what happens? But the possibility of overshooting here is real, and that's what you're hearing. Less about the equity trading values at the moment, but more about the question when rates are at 1% and are going to stay there for a long time, it'll lead to risk, and that could lead to bubbles. But the real question that will be fundamentally bad for everybody is if we miss the inflation turn, and it's not there now, but that's one of the challenges that Chair Powell and his colleagues have is to really be watching this thing, and they need to make sure this great economy grows again at the right rate and above that right rate, and there's some inflation in order to make sure it doesn't go backwards. But on the other hand, it's going to be an interesting, as we move through the end of this year and the next year when this has all come true, the vaccine's out and stuff, it'll be interesting to see how they play through that.
Well, exactly. Let's pursue that just for a moment, because there's been a lot of money given to a lot of people, again, for good and sufficient reason. They've needed it. But the indications are a lot of it's getting saved. It's not getting spent, in part because they don't have a place to spend it, frankly, because a lot of the economy shut down. How concerned are you as you look at the economy, because you have a real vantage point into the economy broadly? How concerned are you that there might be a snapback that might actually trigger, believe it or not, inflation? We haven't talked about it in a long time.
Well, there's been, it's kind of interesting. If you trace last year, and we'll see what the fourth quarter all ends up final. But if you think about down 30, up 30, then up a few percentage, 3 or 4 percentage points or whatever it turns out to be. And then this quarter, the projections are it may come down closer to flat, and that has a little bit to do with the first quarter. But if you actually then pull that apart and look at our consumer, what we call consumer spending, and so debit and credit card spending is one thing, but this is around, people taking money out of ATMs and spending it, writing checks for services, P2P, the Zelle product, which is huge right now. If you look at that spending through the first 23 days of January, it's up 8 or 9% over last year's first 23 days of January, which was up 9% over the year before. So it is bigger in dollar amount. It is growing faster than it grew from 18 to 19, and as fast as 19 to 20. If you look at the type of customer, obviously for the people who are unemployed and you can see them receiving unemployment benefits, they're using the money faster. If you look at the rest of the customers, they're using discretionary retail, not sustenance retail. So they're paying for their food because they're employed. And so I think these stimulus dollars can be spent much more precise. And I think the last case was a good one in that it went unemployment to the unemployment, some supplement there, the $600 to under $75,000. Those are good items, and future stimulus ought to be likewise geared, because otherwise it gets diminishing returns, and then you have the issue of how you pay for it long term, and the issue of whether it creates inflation. But there's a lot of pent-up savings, and we would expect a good second half of the year. Now, it's just the mistake everybody makes is they get talking about all the economics and they forget there's one simple question, which is we have to win the war on the virus. And right now, we're going in with a much better situation from the fight, in that we have this vaccine, and this vaccine's going into people's arms. And that then changes the course of this. And yet, that's still out there, but that's a light at the end of the tunnel that wasn't here this year, last year in the summer.
That was Brian Moynihan, Chairman and CEO of Bank of America. Coming up, working from home once seemed to be the bold new innovation. But now for many, the question is, when can I come back to work?
People don't come back to the office. New York cannot recover. And that's really the sad thing that's happening now.
This is Wall Street Week on Bloomberg. is Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston. Wall Street has joined so many others in figuring out how to work from home efficiently and effectively. But the appreciation for all that added flexibility just may be wearing off.
It feels like it is fraying. It is hard. It takes a lot of inner strength.
It's remarkable that it's working as well as it is, but I don't think it's sustainable.
We have 10, 12% back. We weren't telling anybody to come back, but a lot of people want to come back.
Related Companies is the largest landlord in New York City and one of the most important real estate developers in the entire country. And we asked its CEO, Jeff Blau, what it's going to take to get people back into the office in New York.
The two obvious answers are vaccine rollout, but probably even more critical right now is testing. We all thought after New Year's that everyone would return right back to the office, but in an interesting twist, I have a feeling that the vaccine announcement and the closeness of it has really enabled companies to just say, I'm gonna just wait. It's so close. I'm not gonna pull everyone back to the office yet. Unfortunately, in New York, office actual occupancy, people showing up at their desk every day, is under 10%. And it's critical that we kind of really push testing, make people feel safe and comfortable until they ultimately do get vaccines, so people come back to the office. If people don't come back to the office, New York cannot recover.
One of the things we're very conscious of in New York, obviously, are the financial organizations. Do you have a sense of companies in Wall Street, how eager they are to get their people back in?
I'd say it varies. I mean, I'm sure you've heard David Solomon really encouraging at Goldman to encourage his employees to get back. He had a very funny quote. He kind of said, well, sure, you guys all want to work home from your living room, and you can do that until your competitor shows up in person and wins an assignment. You guys need to get back to the office, right? So I do think that there is pressure. The market will ultimately bring pressure for people to come back. It's interesting. You hear a lot about tech tenants or CEOs saying, I'm going to let my employees just work from home till June or December or forever in some cases. And yet behind the scenes, when you talk to them, and I spend a lot of my time doing exactly that, really trying to understand what their plans are, they realize that this doesn't work from a long-term perspective. They realize that culture does not work. It is not created over Zoom, over Skype, or whatever we're using today. And interactions happen in the hallway, and you bump into each other. I know certainly here at Related, that's how we work. It's a little bit less formal, and our best meetings just occur when you walk down the hall and see somebody. And it's hard to create that on Zoom. You can't schedule that interaction. How do you train new people? You have an incoming class of analysts. Goldman has 2,500 new analysts come in, and what are they supposed to do on Zoom? So I ultimately do think, I think the long run answer here is that there will be more flexibility in the workplace. I think that employees value the ability to work from home a portion of the time. If you divide a person's day into the bump into a wall, an interactive meeting, and writing an investment memo, which they can do by themselves, maybe there's a way to divide that work up. And I'm just using this, the investment memo writing actually happens, on Friday at home. And the rest is, but it also needs to be a coordinated day.
In that world of more flexibility, as you call it, does that affect the long-term demand for commercial real estate as a practical matter? Are you looking at a different curve out in the out years?
I don't really think so, because ultimately you still need, for those days that you're coming in, people to have an office. What I think might happen is that the build out of space might